Good afternoon. Here I am. Thank you for this opportunity to brief you on the Australia-India Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement. So, so in the slide 2, the central question we must address today is critical for Australia's economic future. Does ECTA effectively serve our economic and strategic interests, and what policy interventions are required to maximize its benefits? This briefing will provide you with a comprehensive assessment of ECTA's performance since entering force in December 2022, analyze key stakeholder perspectives and present strategic recommendations for government action. This agreement represents far more than a trade deal. It's a cornerstone of our Indo Pacific strategy and our economic diversification from authoritarian regimes. So, next, we are focusing on strategic context. Let me begin with the strategic significance of this achievement. ECTA represents a historic breakthrough, the first free trade agreement India has concluded with a developed economy outside Asia since the 2010, signed on April 2, 2022 and entering force on December 29. This interim agreement establishes a pathway to comprehensive ECTA with negotiations currently in their 11th round. The geographical context cannot be overstated. Australia faces urgent pressure to diversify our trade relationships, particularly reducing our dangerous over dependence on Chinese markets. Meanwhile, India has emerged as the world's fifth largest economy with projected annual growth rates exceeding 6%. ECTA positions Australia advantageously in India's expanding market while contributing to robust Indo-Pacific economic architecture. This timing reflects both nations' recognition of the geopolitical imperative to strengthen democratic partnerships and build resilient supply chains. ECTA serves those strategic objectives while delivering immediate measurable economic benefits that will outline next. So the next section is section 2, achievements. The next is the strategic Next is the achievements. The agreement's most significant achievements lies in immediate market access gain. Upon entry into force, 85% of Australian goods exports to India valued at Australian dollar 12.6 billion annually received duty-free treatment. This coverage expands to 91% over the next decade through progressive tariff elimination. This represents unprecedented access to India's traditionally protectionist market. Australia exporters will save approximately $2 billion annually in tariffs, while Australian consumers and business benefits from $500 million in annual savings on imported goods. The asymmetrical nature of this outcome demonstrates Australia's negotiating success. While 96% of Indian goods gain immediate duty free access to Australia, this largely reflects our already low tariff structure compared to India's historically high barriers. So, next we includes the key Australian beneficiaries. It includes sectors where we maintain clear competitive advantage: sheep, meat and wool, cord and alumina, metallic ores including copper and manganese, and critically rare earth minerals essential for renewable energy transitions. These sectors align perfectly with India's infrastructure development and manufacturing growth requirements. This services breakthrough deserves particular emphasis. India bought 85 subsectors for Australian service suppliers, representing a 43% improvement over existing commitments. Higher education, professional services, telecommunications, and financial services all gained enhanced access with frameworks established for mutual recognition of professional qualifications. So, the next section we are going to the limitations. However, significant limitations constrain ECT's potential impact and require immediate policy attention. The dairy sector exemplifies these constraints. Australian dairy products represents a $4.4 billion industry remain largely excluded from India's tariff reduction commitments. This exclusion reflects India's protection of domestic dairy farmers but represents a major missed opportunity for Australian exporters. More broadly, sensitive agricultural sectors, including grains, wheat, and sugar, face continued barriers reflecting India's food security priorities and domestic political pressures. The absence of investor state dispute settlement provisions represents another critical limitation. Unlike Australia's typical FTA template, ECTA relies solely on state to state dispute mechanisms. While this addressed Indian concerns about regulatory sovereignty following their negative experience with arbitration. It leaves Australian investors without international arbitration recourse for investment disputes. Implementation challenges threaten to undermine ECTA's projected benefits, India's historical underutilization and of FTA benefits with utilization rates around 25% compared to 70% in developed countries. So, raises serious concerns about practical impact. Australian exporters have already reported difficulties securing proper certificates of origin, highlighting immediate operational barriers to accessing preferential treatment. Next, we are going to the slide 7 stakeholder positions. So, stakeholder reactions reveal both opportunities and challenges requiring policy intervention. The Business Council of Australia and major industry associations provide strong endorsement, emphasizing export diversification benefits and strategic value in reducing Chinese market dependence. Indian industry Indian industry bodies similarly welcome reducing manufacturing costs and expanded export opportunities. However, significant concerns demand government attention. The Australian Council of Trade Unions raised serious objections to labour mobility provisions that waive labour market testing requirements. ACTU submissions emphasize risks of worker exploitation and strongly recommend inclusion of enforceable labour standards in comprehensive negotiations. Australian dairy farmers express understandable disappointment at sector exclusion, while civil society organizations, including AFT-INET, criticized the lack of transparency in negotiations and absence of environment and labor chapters. So, moving to slide 8, the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties and conducted extensive hearings and ultimately recommended ratification while noting ECTA's limitations. Parliamentary analysis emphasized the agreement's interim nature and identified priority areas for comprehensive negotiations, including enhanced labor rights, protections, and expand agricultural access. So the next slide describes the slide 9 describe about the economic projections. So economic modeling projects is substantial bilateral trade growth with ambitious targets of 45 to 50 billion dollars within 5 years and 130 billion dollars by 2030. This represents a 70% increase from the current 27.5 billion dollar baseline. Critical minerals represent a particular strategic outcome, positioning Australia as a key supplier for India's renewable energy transition and advanced manufacturing growth. The timing aligns perfectly with global supply chain diversification efforts and India's emergence as a manufacturing alternative to China. However, realizing these projections requires addressing implementation challenges and advancing comprehensive negotiations effectively. Success depends on three critical factors: effective business utilization of preferential access, systematic reduction of regulatory barriers, and successful conclusion of CECA negotiations. So, with the slide 10, its policy recommendations. Based on this analysis, I recommend immediate and strategic policy intervention across three priority areas. First, enhance implementation effectiveness through targeted business facilitation measures. This includes streamlining certificates of origin procedures, implementing comprehensive trade promotion programs, and developing stakeholder education initiatives. We must establish robust regulatory cooperation mechanisms to address non tariff barriers systematically. Second, develop a strategic approach to comprehensive ECTA negotiations. Priority areas include securing expanded agricultural market access, establishing robust investment protection frameworks, and incorporating labor and environment standards consist with our international obligations. The government that enhance consultation process with civil society stakeholders to address legitimate transparency concerns. Third, leverage ECTA's strategic position in regional trade architecture. Australia should use our first mover advantage in India's expanding trade relationships to influence supply chain resilience initiatives, particularly in critical minerals and renewable energy sectors. So now we are moving to the strategic imperatives in conclusion. So we must establish robust monitoring mechanisms to track utilization rates, identify implementation barriers, and measure progress toward economic projections. Quarterly reporting to Parliament will ensure accountability and enable rapid policy adjustment as needed. So, in conclusion, ECTA represents a strategic foundation, not a destination. While the agreement delivers immediate benefits and positions Australia advantageously in India's growth trajectory, its ultimate success depends on effective implementation and strategic expansion through comprehensive negotiations. The policy imperative is clear. We must transform these interim gains into a comprehensive partnership that delivers the $130 billion trade relationship both countries envision. With proper implementation support and strategic ECA negotiations, ECTA can become a cornerstone of Australia's economic future in the Indo Pacific. This agreement serves our national interest by reducing economic dependence on authoritarian regimes while strengthening partnerships with the world's largest democracy. The question is not whether we can afford to invest in ECTA's success, but whether we can afford not to. Thank you for your attention. I welcome your questions and look forward to supporting government efforts to maximize ECTA's strategic potential. Thank you.